we can record this event. Okay, I want to welcome you all here tonight for this book club session on Donut Economics book. It is I assume that you have this book either like hard copy or PDF. Excellent, good job, Gary. So, okay, wonderful. And so, I mean, if we will have anyone else tonight, I will accept to, normally I was told we had 19 people sign up for this book club. But, maybe in the last moment, there are some, unexpected things that people might have to take care of it. But to respect your time, I really want to go ahead and start. Well, if we have anyone else coming to join us, I will be gladly accept us to the session. Let me just start with about who I am, and then I'll take to get, if you don't mind, then after that, I want you to introduce yourself very briefly, then we can start. My name is Akif Aydin. I'm a professor of economics. I teach at USC Upstate, basically the principles of macroeconomics and microeconomics. I received my PhD from Clemson University. My specialty was international economics, especially I'm highly concerned about the growth, the export sophistication. So of how the export sophistication of a country would impact its growth. So that was really my specialty. So this book is an excellent book for me to really read, entertain, and really re-examine some of my learnings as well, as it's kind of indicating in the beginning. And I'm not sure if I have really, if I can unlearn what I have learned, that's what she suggests. That's something. It's very interesting part of this book that she comes up with how we teach in economics. That's I might feel guilty part of what I teach as well. But overall, that's part of my professional. But in addition, I'm a businessman. I have small businesses in South Carolina, as well as Georgia, and now Iowa. So a couple states, and what primarily I operate is daycare business. So that is what my primary business. And recently, I have purchased a university campus in Iowa and planning to establish a private boarding high school, as well as in the coming years to establish a university over there. So that is, I'm being said that I'm highly interested in businesses, economics, academia, part of my personal interests and my background. So without further delay, I just want to get to you, if you don't mind, to tell me a little bit about yourself, if you feel comfortable. Then we can go ahead, just start our discussion on the book. Anne, would you like to start with you, if you don't mind?
Sure. Okay. I helped start a group called Columbia Resilience in Columbia, South Carolina. It was, excuse me. It's part of the Transition Town Network. I've read all of Rob Hopkins' books. Are you familiar with the transition movement?
No.
Okay. The transition movement basically started in 2004 in Ireland. There was a guy named Rob Hopkins who was teaching a permaculture class, and this guy, Colin Campbell, who was president of the Association for Peak Oil, APSO, lived nearby. And so they invited him to come to their class. And when he told them about peak oil, they got a little bit alarmed. And so he said, okay, as a permaculture class, what can you do? Can you think about doing? And they created something called an energy descent action plan. which means that you figure out where you want to be in 30 years, and then you figure out how to do it, what stage you need to be at 25 years, 20, 10, 5, like that. So they actually presented this. This was not Totnes. This was Kinsale in Ireland. They presented it to the town council. The town council adopted it. And as far as I know, they're still working on it. Then Rob Hopkins moved to Totnes in England and started the whole thing over again. And so there are transition groups on every continent, as far as I know. Part of the emphasis that they had on peak oil meant that when, they discovered shale oil and everything else, people thought, okay, well, maybe the problem isn't as serious as we thought. But now that it's pretty clear that we have experienced peak traditional oil, the transition groups are still working with the notion that relocalization is what we need to do in the future. Because that was one of the tenets of the transition movement, is that obviously, if you wait for the government, it'll be too little, too late. If you try to do it by yourself, it's too little. If you do it as a community, it might be just enough, just in time. So, starting out with that group in Colombia, we're still there. We're the only one in South Carolina that I know of. And the board passed a resolution saying that the concept of degrowth is the concept that best expresses what we think is needed for the future. And so that's where we are. I read Donut Economics with a group of people from Columbia Resilience 2 summers ago.
Interesting, very interesting. Thanks so much, Anna. It's very interesting that we have you from Colombia. I was in Colombia this morning, by the way, just in the afternoon.
Well, I just want to say, actually, I don't live in Colombia anymore. I have a farm in Saluda County, but I go back and forth quite often. Okay. I'm kind of in 2 places.
As you know, like now, after COVID, Zoom is connecting us globally very easily from anywhere. So we are, we are connected globally, basically, right? But it's very interesting. Thanks so much for sharing, all this. I really appreciate, and I believe that you will bring a lot of insights, part of the book and the transition group, what you are doing as well tonight. Really appreciate. Thank you. Gary?
Akeem, we've bumped into each other in a number of places. My wife is Deborah Meadows, and she's the one that signed up. And she was standing behind me. You couldn't see her because this is one of those background things. She couldn't get on. She may have gone back downstairs to try to get back on her own computer. But anyway, I was reading. I'd heard about donut economics. I have a degree in economics, not a PhD, and work in the financial world as a financial advisor. But I'm also very much attuned to trying to find sustainability. I'm on the board of Sustaining Way. I live on a small organic farm and do a lot of things that are related to sustainability. And when I heard about donut economics, I started reading it and it made a lot of sense. There's a lot of questions I have that, how does this work? How would that work? But I've always had this vision that if we constantly are pushing for growth in a finite world, it would be like these time-lapse movies I've seen of a dead animal that slowly gets consumed by all the maggots, and then there's nothing but bones left. And that's the vision I see of the earth if we don't learn to work in some more sustainable way. And so I'm real interested in any economic theories that would look at how can we reorient the economic system so that it is more sustainable. And the other concern I have, I've read about historical periods in the past when population the population has a steep decline, like during a plague or something of that nature, and it's usually followed by an economic collapse. And I think one of the things that will have to happen over time is a slow decline in the population of the Earth. And we're starting to see that in places like Europe and China and other places, and potentially here in the near future. How do we create a sustainable economic system that doesn't collapse when we have a contraction in the size of the economy? That's another question I have as we try to look at ways that this could happen. But that's why I'm interested in the book. I'm interested in some of what's been said there. I only found it a few weeks ago. I mean, my wife, as I was reading it, she said, hey, there's Akif's doing this book discussion on it. So I've got to sign up for that. I haven't read the whole book yet. I'm about halfway through the book. So
yeah, Gary, thanks so much again. It's so nice to see you again, and I hope that your wife she will be able to join us. If from the same platform or separate one, that's going to be awesome. Thank you for this kind of insights and about the background. Yes, Anne, you have a question?
My computer cord jumped off, and I missed Gary's beginning of his introductions, where he said where he's from.
Live in Simpsonville, work in Greenville.
Yes. And I think
thank you.
Great. By the way, I also live in Five Oaks, Greenville area. So where my business is, one of my locations is here in Five Oaks. Perfect. So I want to really keep this. That's one of the. I was told that it's going to be about an hour of session. So our goal is to end this by 8 p.m. to make sure that I just give you a kind of expectation about the timing. So if you have any planning, any other things to do this evening, so you can actually have some time after 8 p.m. if you want to, do it. So part of the format, I love that we have really kind of more conversation rather than me to be talking as a monologue. So absolutely, I love to, because you even though Gary, you said you are half the way to the book, I think that the most impressive part of the book is the like I would say, the first part of the book is very impressive. The rest is actually giving the layout about it, right? So I'm not sure within 45 minutes, even though we can get, maybe, for the first part, 50 pages, therefore that's more than enough for us to really cover part for the sake of this. It's very impressive, overall. So I see this book is some part is technical in economics. If you do not have like at least some background in economics, it might be difficult to enjoy with reading. Because there are the technical terms that in economics that to make it a kind of smooth reading, at least you should be, having some of those backgrounds. But overall, for me, it was absolutely a joy to read the book, because it brings a very different perspective. To be honest, I want to start with my personal background about when I was doing my doctorate education in Clemson. I'm a person of always critical thinking, questioning, So when the first time I remember in our one of our micro classes giving the assumptions, like in economics, you come up with a lot of assumptions to start with a theory. Okay, you assume, first of all, human beings are rational. Okay, yes, that is the basic, assumption for modern economics. And you also make assumptions. We have, let's say, perfect competitive markets. You make an assumption, of many different things. But those assumptions are rarely hold in real life. So then when I kind of really approach, okay, those assumptions, the assumptions that we really, for the human beings, more is better. Like we are always asking for more. That's one of the assumptions in economics. So when I question some of the assumptions in my one of my micro class, I remember, and I came with some comments. My professor, he told me, or if you want to get the answers for those, this is not the Department of Philosophy, and this is the Department of Economics. Go to, he was bothered with my kind of questioning, go to the Department of Philosophy, not here. So I see that's something I feel when part of this book, remember, she is kind of telling about, a student, Yuan Yang, when she arrived to Oxford University. She, I think, had almost the same challenge, why? Because you are being really told a different story, and you have to bind with that assumption in order to pass your classes, in order to really, do decent in, in the field. If you want to be successful in economics, to be a professor, or to really get a job, or to really do, any paper to be published in a very, well-known publication, the magazine. So you have to, really go with the assumptions. Otherwise, Clemson was more influenced with the Chicago schools, like that's what the schools of thought. It's really more liberal. That's what most of our professor in Clemson, is really trying to promote. But in terms of the assumptions, first of all, I want to start in economics. I think there are a lot of things to question with. Being like economics itself to being a science is questionable. By the way, like the physics, like the biology, because the physics, biology, math, those are the pure science you can test, right? You can have the theories, it's a question, and you can drive the laws, and because those laws is valid in everywhere, but when we call economics as a science, we usually call the fundamental law of demand, fundamental law of supply. Those are the basic, couple laws that you say as the price increases, the quantity demanded goes down, or as the price decreases, the quantity demanded goes up, holding everything else constant, like the ceteris paribus. That's like we try to give some terms, coin the terms to make it look like science, okay? And to tell, okay, there is laws in economics. Those laws are universal. You go everywhere. You can actually observe those laws. But yeah, it is correct. On average, we can, if we hold everything else constant, and as the price goes down, the quantity demanded might goes up, depending what type of goods you are talking, whether those are normal goods, those are like, or inferior goods, or like you say, luxury goods. Depending on the nature of the good, the laws might really different. But overall, I will say, there are some aspects that absolutely justify economics as a science. I agree with that one. I want to be fair to my own field. Absolutely. It is almost like, fair to say it is a science, but it is questionable. There's a lot of areas that, it is overlapping with philosophy, with psychology, with sociology, with political science. So it is not like a science that like the physics, biology is very distinct. No. So there are a lot of, I will say, intersections. There are a lot of interactions with different other studies, other fields. Therefore, I think first of all, to acknowledge, to approach economics more comprehensively is important. But like when, part of the fields, the academia, to make it a very, like I will say, alienating from the other fields to come up with a lot of assumptions to force to make it a science is really taking the taste out of it. To me, economics is tasty when you approach comprehensively, inclusively with all these perspectives. Then it will, because it tells there are normative economics, positive economics. So economics, it tells if it comes to the, like the questions of factuals, then you can call economics. Otherwise, let's say, the growth rate in the United States is, 3.4% is a fact or a data we can observe. Therefore, we can say it is positive. But when it comes to normative, or the growth rate should be 5%, it's a comment, it's normative, it's not positive. So therefore you kind of incorporate your comments, your view in a statement. Therefore it is not economics, because economics is more about the facts to make it law. But overall, those are kind of the things I just want to personally share. But let's kind of come to the book. I think the donut economics is a wonderful to re-examine the concept of the growth, the GDP especially. GDP is less than 100 years old concept, but it shaped the entire world policy, the gross domestic policy, right? The gross domestic product, GDP, is the market value of all goods and services produced in a country within a year. That's kind of the definition of the GDP, right? So there are different ways you calculate the GDP, either through the income approach or expenditure approach in economics. There are two ways that it was developed by the economist. So it's kind of details. You can actually go ahead and see how it's being calculated. But overall, it is like, it's like a map. So the map does not really, tell about the details of the, geography, like the location. It gives you an idea, right? When you go from point A to B, if you get a direction from your GPS to find a, for your destination, when you look at the map, it's kind of a direction, not the actual representation of the location, right? So the same thing in economics, when we look at the concepts, so it is like a map. So in the real life, you might really, it's a guidance, but it is not really representing 100% of the, real life. It's very helpful. It's very useful. It is really good, guidance for policymakers. Absolutely. And therefore, economics as a field, as a science, is a wonderful, very useful for humanity, like any other sciences, right? So therefore, and we see the benefits, and we see the economists shaping different policies across the globe, in the United States as well. And we see most of the time the forecasts and the projections are coming really very accurate. So those accuracy of the projections of the number about the unemployment rate, about inflation, about the growth, right? Those are all great things. It tells, I think, economists, they did great job to approach, to the production of the goods and services being really measured in a very way to be turned into the policies. That's what, eventually it's going to help. But the obsession of the growth, obsession of the GDP growth is something absolutely bothers me as well. As in the book, it bothers. Yes, Anne, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, Anne.
Well, you say that GDP is used by politicians to create policy, which is true. I don't think most of them understand what it really is. I don't think they understand that it combines things that have grown that we shouldn't be happy about. Divorce, that's great for GDP, but it's not great for the families maybe. And even this guy Kuznets, who created it for FDR during the Second World War. So FDR could see the material flow through, he could see what was needed for the war effort and everything else. But Kuznets warned them not to use it as a measure of benefit, and they just did anyway. So, I think it's bogus. It's totally bogus to talk about people using it for policy. Most of them have no idea what it measures and what the consequences of employing it for policy making what the consequences are.
I think great point. When in economics, when you approach the GDP, always part of the teaching in macroeconomics. This is a subject of macroeconomics. So part of the teaching, you always come to the critics of GDP. Okay, what type of really the GDP is not a perfect indicator. It's a measurement tool. It is a measurement tool that it measures the value of the services and goods being produced within a country. So you as a business, let's say you want to see how much output you have produced, how many, if you have a production, small, let's say, production company, you produces tools. You want to really measure, let's say, how many, this is the donut economics, right? If you have a donut shop, and then you want to see how many donuts you have really produced throughout the day, how many you sold, how much was the cost. Overall, you want to measure your production output, right? So now the idea, creating like a GDP as a useful tool, how can we really add like the haircut, orange, apple, plumbing services, teaching in the college all together and turn into a dollar value and then make sense out of that one and to really drive some policies. That is what the GDP is doing, right? GDP is adding everything together and turning into a number, a dollar value. And so that way you try to make interpretation out of this dollar value, and then try to also through that indicator and interpretation, overall, that's a useful for the policymakers, because eventually, if you want to, especially for politicians, they have been using this very obsessively because they feel this is an indicator of the success, the indicator for them, they have accomplished something good. So therefore, that is a question. Is this really an accomplishment? Is this, a constant growth? Does the constant growth and the increase of the GDP, is this really a good indicator for the wellness of a country, for the wellness of the humanity? That is the question. So overall, that's what the book is really examining, this the GDP being used by all politicians across the globe, part of their campaigning, part of their goal setting, and part of their success measurement. That is absolutely something we need to re-examine. To me, I would not absolutely advise GDP as an indicator of the happiness. That's wrong. I would not advise GDP as indicator of the success. Absolutely not right. Okay, there are some factors. It's helpful, it's useful, it tells something, but if you just portray the picture of success based on the GDP growth, it is absolutely missing. Okay, that's my feeling. So, but unfortunately, it has been used almost the sole indicator by the policymakers across the globe to be very so obsessed. Part of the GDP growth is comparing the different levels between the countries, first of all, how we are doing better than China, okay, how we are doing better than Russia. And so to compare different, between countries and how advanced, how, like how much production we do compared to the other countries, or how much we do compared to ourselves with previous years. So, but this book is acknowledging that the resources in economics, there are 4 factors of productions: land, labor, entrepreneurship, and capital. Okay, so those are the factors that we bring together and make the production. And we know that part of economics, the first definition, the very basic, simple definition of economics, it tells it's a science to maximize our objectives, given that we are facing scarcity. Okay, that's the scarcity is one of the first term we learn in economics. We are, as a human beings, we are facing scarcity. Under that reality, how can we really maximize our objectives and do the choices? Once you are facing the scarcity, what you have to do, you have to choose, because you cannot get everything. It's scarce resources. if the resources are scarce, then how can we have an unlimited growth? By definition, it is wrong. So therefore, that's Kate, the author, is absolutely right. We cannot have a sustainable way to walk to the future by obsessions of the growth, because that's impossible by its nature. Okay, so overall, I personally, before to get into discussion, I want to really tell my personal approach to the GDP growth. I feel there are some parts is very useful, but also I feel it has been used so extremely in the wrong direction. To be, that's not good to have the GDP to be in the center of the policy making. It is a useful tool, but it should not be the goal of the policy making. But unfortunately, it has been in the center of many, policy making process, and it has been used as the pure criteria of the success. That is absolutely wrong. There are a lot of deficiencies with this indicator to measure the success, to measure the happiness, to measure the wellness of society. We have many things are not being captured part of the GDP. I mean, GDP does not capture many things part of our wellness, our happiness. So then it is not therefore a complete indicator to approach. So I will say, it is good to use GDP, but it is bad to use as the main goal in policymaking. So now I want to leave for your comments so we can, have some conversation.
Well, if I understood some of the book correctly, for example, if I hired a lawn service to cut my grass, then that service is measured as part of GDP. But if I got my lawnmower out and cut it myself, the same thing happened, but it's not measured as a part of GDP. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, if there was a way to find out how to add and include your own service to yourself, it will be part of GDP. It is because the reason it's not added to the GDP, there is no way that it can be calculated. Okay, so because when you pay a loan maker company, then this transaction is being recorded. This transaction being recorded, it's easy to capture and add to GDP. But when you do yourself, when you fix your breakfast in the morning, you do not report to anywhere. So since you do not report, it is difficult to measure it, to calculate it. It is not because it is being intentionally excluded. It is not. There is no way that it can be assessed or figured out, Gary. That's kind of the reason. Yes, whatever the services you do by yourself, if it is not part of a transaction, it is not added to the GDP because the value of GDP is only through the captured production, but this is not being captured.
And that, and I think about how GDP has grown over the years, and I think also about how many people now eat out instead of cook at home, for example. If we could measure how much of that GDP that wasn't measured was lost when we went to something that was measured. And so we're losing a true product from cooking at home, even though we're eating out and we're measuring one and we weren't measuring the other. So it looks like growth, but was there really any growth?
So I will say what you are telling, Gary, is one of the things is already being acknowledged by the economists that the GDP as a term that does not really capture the entire productions of the output. Okay, therefore it might not be perfect representations of the output, especially for the third world countries. There are underground transactions. Okay, so a lot of things are not being reported. Therefore, it might, like the GDP number for those countries, GDP per capita, might not really representing their purchase power or their wellness, economic wellness. That's correct. But the idea over here, Gary, is whether shall we really be obsessed with the GDP growth? What is the purpose of GDP growth? So why do we really want to have a growth, like constant growth? Because in economics overall, it says part of the assumption, more is better than less. Is this a right assumption? Because this is the foundation. So if you accept this as an assumption and build everything on top of this, then by nature, you have to ask more because less is negative. So that is one of the things that I think we need to question. Is more better than less? What is the cost of getting more than, Gary? Okay, if we sacrifice the family values, if we sacrifice the relationship to attain more production, is this better? Is this good? So what is the price?
I'll answer that. No, I'll answer that. The answer is no.
Here you go. Like, look, in America, now the loneliness is one of it is most dangerous. It's more dangerous than the cancer. People are alone because we lost the fabric of family, society, okay? Because part of the book, it tells, okay, there's no society. Remember, that's what, as one of here, the Margaret, she tells, okay, there's no society. We are all individuals, and the families. So if we lost the sense of society, the community, what else we lost with that sense? Because if we make everyone only individuals, we perceive them as a consumer, not an individual of a society, not a part of society anymore. Like in economic transaction, you only perceive the relationship as a consumer, right? Not as a human being. So then that lost a lot of human nature because we, as a human beings, we cannot really value everything, economically. There are a lot of values for the humanity that it cannot be expressed financially. But once you try to contain everything financially, when you try to everything measure to convert in dollar value, then you kind of really lose a lot of humanity. Okay, so that is the part that donut economics is questioning. If you try to dollarize everything part of an economy, then you lose a lot. So we cannot dollarize kindness. Okay, so because part of the assumption Adam Smith is telling, it is not the benevolence from butcher, from baker, and like to prepare your dinner, but it is because of the self-interest. That means like the humans are in one way selfish, but that's not right assumption. We are not selfish. We have a lot of we have the aspect and the dimensions of being kind, being selfless. I mean, being really altruistic, right? So, and how can you really then explain this with the self-interest? Because you are at the interest of the other people when you donate, when you do kind of really, be altruistic. So therefore, part of the donut economics now in this last 2 centuries, the approach of the GDP growth itself is, to me, at cost of the humanity. So the cost that we pay if our human aspect. So therefore, you might be part of any religious group. You might be part of the culture, like different cultures, diversity. So it means that we kind of sacrifice our cultural values. We kind of sacrifice our religious values for an economic transaction. We try to, because value everything as a dollarization, as a monetary. So that is gonna make it a very dangerous direction because you forced the community and a society to be a consumer, not to be to be a human. So I think that is one of the fundamental point over here, part of this books. So what is the foundation of a society? What's the foundation of a country? Is this to be a consumer or to be a human being. If we are a human being, if there's a humanness, then there is being a good neighbor, being a good family member, being a good friend, good spouse, right? So there are a lot of things that we value. But now I was born in Turkey. I moved to the United States in 2004. One of the first things really struck me when I see, you might criticize about this, to compare different cultures. Like in Turkey, the fabric of the family is so important because the capitalism is not so dominating the society yet. Here in America, we know the heart of the capitalism. We live in America, right? And but in Turkey, yeah, the capitalism has a big influence, but still there is other values dominating in the human's life. So one of the things is really I can compare the family relationship. When I moved to the United States, when I learned, so most of the like the children, when they are like at the age of 18, even though they live in the same city, they don't want to live with their parents because you need to learn how to be, be kind of standing on your foot, to take responsibilities, how to live, responsibly. There are different approaches kind of promoting to be, living your family, that you can take some responsibility. But in Turkey, it is the family's goal, not the financial concern. Okay, I'm not here to learn how to manage my financial life. I'm here to manage my family life, my relations with my siblings, my relations with my parents. So the objective is not financials; it is the humanness. So now here in pure capitalist, or I cannot say pure, but more capitalist view, okay, your objective is your financials, not your parents, not your family, not your society. Then when you're at the age of 18, okay, I can leave my parents and I can leave my siblings because my objective to get a job, to have to understand how I can really live by myself, to make, to understand about a lot of financial responsibilities. You see kind of the teachings and the society is evolving to replacing the financials to the humanness. That's what I kind of feel. But then that kind of bring a lot of problems. Again, as I said, the problem of loneliness is about, most of Americans, they feel they are lonely. And that loneliness is more dangerous than the cancer because it's kind of really a big problem. It creates anxiety, it creates depressions, it creates a lot of, health issues. Why? Because everyone is more kind of focused to their financial concerns. They are more a consumer than to be a human. So I would say in this respect, why? Because we are so obsessed with GDP. We are so obsessed with the economic growth. We are so obsessed with the financials. That's every month when you kind of excitingly wait, what is the unemployment rate, what is the growth rate, what is the inflation rate, because those are kind of the data that drives the society, creates the motivation, and tells how well we are doing as a country. As that is one of the things is really crazy. Yes, Anne. I'm sorry, guys. Let's kind of go ahead. Yes, Anne.
I am not waiting breathlessly for the unemployment stats every month. Most people are not waiting breathlessly for the unemployment stats every month. The policymakers who have been led astray by the economists, they are the ones who are waiting breathlessly for the stats. You understand? Scarcity is not, yes, there are people who are poor. Yes, there are people who lack things, but scarcity is a construct of capitalism. And part of what makes it be the way it is this, you called it dollarization, monetization of the informal economy. The informal economy, here's another book you can read after you finish. I can't read it, Surviving the Future. Surviving the Future by an English economist named David Fleming. You desperately need to read that if you have not done so. But the informal economy is what creates culture. It's what creates the things that make life worth living. And what capitalism is doing is monetizing everything about our lives. Okay, we can't count babysitting for free by grandma. okay, we can't count it if I make breakfast for my family, but if I take them to the Waffle House, then we can count it. That is just insane. I'm sorry. It's insane. And I blame economists as much as anybody, because economists just love to be sought after for their advice by politicians. I'm sorry.
And I would take this, absolutely, I agree with you, but economists are not only one to blame, because we are all as a part of society. When you go college, you take the, economics, you take like the sociology, psychology, many different classes and fields. But the problem is the questioning, we check as is whatever is presented to us. The students I teach, like in college, students, they barely question the things. They do not question it. They kind of accept as is whatever is presented to them. There is
you have to present this other stuff. Well, if they don't question it, you have to throw it at them. Gee.
I mean, and I will say, like,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think that's good.
I haven't had an economist to beat up on in a long time. I'm sorry.
That's good. The thing that I will say, I think, like, the critical thinking is a wonderful, foundation of human being. Okay, so we are given, intellect, and then we need to use responsibly, absolutely, in the best way to, first of all, serve ourselves, serve our community, serve our families. But the thing that, unfortunately, and this, especially here, what I see, it might be too late. I don't know where we lost this, but most of students, they kind of come with their, the preconception they already have about this is something good. They don't really think necessarily this could be really bad. That there could be some alternatives, and so we lost the critical thinking. We lost kind of really questioning. That's what I believe. So economists. They do advise to the policymakers. They are advisors, but remember, this is only one field out of many fields in science. So I will say yes, they might be guilty, but they are not the only one. Yeah, Gary, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say something about Kate. In her book, mentions that Adam Smith moved back in with his mother in his 40s. And she took care of him and cooked him his meals and all that. And that was a part of the economy. He didn't seem to measure or write about that she was doing all this production of taking care of him while he wrote his book. But I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it, that measurement of not seeing what was right in front of you, the economy of homemaking, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful example. Yes, but just kind of, remember during Adam Smith's time, there was no such a concept of GDP. So because it's a very recent one. But overall, what Adam Smith really promoted is the self-interest. The book is telling, okay, the mother served to you at age of 40-some, but it was not because of, then if she served you, if she was really selfish, she wouldn't really serve you, right? So then what he's telling about the humans are, but Adam Smith will come, that's interesting, like Gary. So let's say if you tell, okay, because mother, you are at age of, let's say Adam Smith, he is 40-some years old, he goes back and now mother is taking care of him and really doing everything for him while he is writing his book. But then the economists, I know that the economists will approach like this. Okay, this is still self-interest because she receives the pleasure out of serving to the son. It is out of her self-interest that serves to the son. Then we still can consider this as the fact. It is very interesting how the term trajectory is just kind of really being like the rubber band, how you can really approach the term of self-interest. Like even though if you say, like, let's say you do donations, you kind of help other people, and economists tell this is out of the self-interest, okay, because it is the self-interest of your satisfaction when you serve someone else. So it is, you can twist even those like the pure, I will say, the human feelings, to twist to include the term of the self-interest, unfortunately. So that is something, in one way, if you define helping someone, just taking care of your son, your family, part of the self-interest, then I'm still selfish. You see how, it makes sense in one way. You say it is self-interest, but it is not selfishness. Okay, that is something different. But I will say, Adam Smith, what he brought, the invisible hand, he is telling, because out of the self-interest, if we do not have the intervention of a government or central authority, eventually we'll have the equilibrium in the market. Because if everybody is pursuing their self-interest, out of their self-interest, they have to be the kind. You have to be kind. It is part of your self-interest. You have to be nice to other part of your self-interest, because you will lose your job, you will lose your reputation, those kind of things. Then the idea of self-interest is so being pejorative, in one way, to kind of include almost everything under it. Then, because I know how the economists approach to this term, and then it makes sense in one way. Then you raise a generation, you shape a mind of, okay, it's good to pursue my self-interest. It's not bad to really, the motivation overall will be yourself. But if you kind of create the selfish individuals in society, and then you believe the selfishness is going to produce the most output, that's important, the optimization, the efficiency, let's put this in more kind of professional term in economics, the efficiency, then the intention is going to be lost, because the intention is then you, nothing else. Whatever you do is you is the intention, you is the goal, right? You are the center of every action. Then I will say, if that is the kind of the idea of economists are promoting, I think that's what we creates a very unhealthy society. That's what I believe. Because the intention, the motivation is a very important, even though it might kind of explain to the same action. So therefore, I believe religion is an important factor. I believe, the culture is an important factor. So we should preserve different cultures. We should preserve the different religions, otherwise, if you remove this from the society, eventually you will remove the humanness. We are not, we are not a creature came to this earth to just be an economic being. Doesn't make sense. We are a very complex human being. We are a very complex creature, right? We have a very complex relationship with, many things in this universe. But if you kind of really narrow down everything to the economic, value, then you kind of you remove the humanness. That's what I believe.
Right. What about love between family members and other people? And it's not that doesn't fit as well if it's all economics. So, and Kate said somewhere in the book, she quoted in The Wealth of Nations, where Adam Smith said something to the effect that it's not all about the rational human being, that we're also very generous and kind and selfless in many ways. Sometimes people sacrifice their lives to save other people, and that's not self-interest. I can't imagine how that would be a self-interest type thing. So Adam
Smith was not an economist only, because during his time there was no such kind of distinct field of economics. Now we later on kind of really make a more and narrowing to the to the new fields, emerging field as an economist. He kind of really was writing on political science, psychology, sociology, economics. So he was a politician. So Adam Smith was a very he approached it very comprehensively. But overall, when I tried to read his book of The Wealth of Nations several times, and I couldn't complete because it's so boring, like it is so boring as economists. I tried to really kind of force myself to read it, because it's kind of capturing like about 250 years about the shillings of the British, monetary, like the term, and then tells about that time. The examples are very, outdated. So now we kind of really get Adam Smith to be the father of modern economics. Everybody's quoting almost one or two things from him to make it the father of modern economics. That's nothing else. Get the Wealth of Nations, Yeah, he approaches to explain the different ways, but I doubt that, many economists even finished his book because the Wealth of Nations, try to read it. It's very boring. You cannot really, if you can finish, congratulations. So everybody kind of tries to quote him for a couple very well-known, like, about, again, so therefore, that's a part of examining, questioning, again, the same thing. We kind of accept as an authority someone and we move forward with that one. Okay, we do not really examine. We assume, okay, if everybody tells the same thing, there should be a fact behind, but you are right here, when we are not absolutely, look at, now there is a new fields emerge called behavioral economics. Okay, right. Look at the behavioral economics. It is, to me, is much more objective to capture the human's nature than I will say, just the modern economics. So that therefore we need to think, when we look at the human beings, I think we look at the psychology, sociology. We need to look at the religion, philosophy. Those are the different things we need to examine the human beings. And eventually, and it comes to, like your point, the policymakers, the advisors should really comprehensively bring all this together and shape, the society or the policies based on those values. Otherwise, unfortunately, it's going to lead such a society, such a country, we will not be able to undo, because unlearning, right, and undoing in the human nature is much more difficult than to teach, to really, start from the beginning from scratch. So therefore, as an economist, I will say, okay, I might also be guilty in some way, but I feel that part of my teaching, I always really approach to my students to encourage and challenge them to be critical thinking. That's one thing I really love to share with them, to make sure that they do not get as ease, even though we kind of learn together, we go over the terms, they have to learn. I cannot really redesign a textbook to bring my own approach, because then they will fail part of, if they go to transition any colleges, anything part of the field. It is very interesting. You are locked. If you are part of a system. You are unfortunately forced to teach in a one direction. If you do not teach those, then the students will not be able to arrive to their goal and objective in one way. But the best way is to, while you are teaching, and to kind of teach them also to be critical thinking, to questioning about the things. That's what I kind of feel is the best. But overall, for this Donut Economics, it is an excellent book. It tells how we should not be obsessed about GDP growth. There are a lot of deficiencies with the term of the GDP. It's not a perfect indicator. It's not even though a good indicator, to be honest, the GDP, let alone to be a perfect. So therefore, we should absolutely use GDP as a term. It is useful, but the donut, the idea of the donut is very good analogy, what she brings up, right? When you look at environments, when you look at the poverty, when you look at inequality, when you look at the justice, right? When you look at the distribution of the wealth among the individuals, look, 1% of the entire, the top 1% shares 99% of the wealth in the world. Come on, we talk about the growth. When you think about the distribution of this growth, who gets, the output? Imagine now 1% shares, receives 99% of the output, and 99% receives 1% of the output. What type of growth we can talk about it, right? So, but when we do not talk about equality, when we do not talk about the distribution of the growth, it is missing, right? Because GDP does not tell about that. GDP just tell about the number. That, then GDP is telling, when we look at the, the average GDP per capita, okay, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk is being one individual part of the average as me, but it is not the right way to do calculation, right? Because the distribution is not the concern of the GDP, right? The total output is the concern. Who receives that total output? They say it's not my business. It is like it is maybe philosophy. It is just different fields. Economics doesn't get interest about the distribution. It tells about let's produce more, grow just the output. But that's not that should not be the main objective. And we should look more other values. Therefore, the idea of the donut come with being more responsible. In terms of sustainability of the environment, the climate change, to have the ceiling that we not really transgress that ceiling, but also we not really fall to a base, to foundation, to provide the, very fundamental rights to everyone, right? So I think that's the healthy society and the healthy world we can create. Therefore, it is so important when you look at the 2015 United Nations, the goals are, the Sustainable Development Goals. I think those are wonderful criteria, but unfortunately, United Nations does not have any enforcing power over the countries. It's just a wishful, thing, So therefore, when you look at those goals doesn't really have any enforcing power. Yes, and
you realize that most of those boundaries we have already transgressed as a planet, and especially as the United States. We've already transgressed all those things that she's trying to keep in the donut. So, why did you want us to talk about this book?
Okay.
Because it sounds like you're saying we can fix this, but we've already transgressed so many of those boundaries. It's hard to know. Okay, yeah. 50% of the work that people do, this is a statistic from Jason Hickel, 50% of the work that wage earners make goes to the wealth, goes to like the top 5%. They don't, they're not working for themselves. They're working for the top 5%. They could just work half as much and still get all of the good for themselves. What they're doing is creating wealth for those other people. And in doing so, we are transgressing all these biophysical boundaries. This is a serious situation.
And to me, the reason I'm so fun of this book is create the awareness. Okay, so first of all, you have to create the awareness. If you do not create awareness,
okay, yeah, I agree.
That is the first place you need to start with, right? The change will come with the awareness. Then once you're aware, then you may, like as you said, you organize. You have an organization now, right? And so the same thing. Once the people once we create awareness, I'm sure that we will create the movements. Then after the second step is create the movements, to create organizations. So then that will force the policy makers. They will be part of the policy-making process. And eventually it will come the change in that direction. But awareness, if there is no awareness, none of the others will form, correct? So therefore, here, there is nothing I can really come to say, oh, here's the way we can fix. The best way to me is to create awareness, create education, create understanding. So therefore, one of the things I do in my class, I think I can be fair in this way. Maybe I'm the only economist. I do something, part of my grading policy, I tell you have to have service engagement in the community to get 10% of your final grade. Is a project. It's called Service Engagement Project. My students, they have to interact with random individuals in the society to discuss the 10 different concepts they have learned part of the class. Okay, to educate them and to have a brainstorming and discussion, because most of people they don't really have a good understanding of understanding of macroeconomics, understanding of economics itself. Because when I ask the questions, the first thing I ask in my class, what is economics? most of students, they come to making money, to be rich. Okay, the way that the kind of people, when you ask what economics is, they kind of think is how to become rich, how to make money, it's about money. They all say it's about money, money, they don't know it's even though what money is. So that's the problem if you do not educate society, if you cannot create awareness, and how can you expect a change in the society, right? So therefore, and to me, this is a wonderful session and recommendation, at least through Atlantic Institute, to promote, a critical thinking through this book, to create some awareness, to let the individuals at least to approach different ways. Hopefully, this is going to be a kind of small, humble steps, but everything starts with a very small steps with one individual, right? Everything starts with one individual. If you want to make a change, you have to start from somewhere. So that is what the only thing I would I would recommend of how we can make the change is really create awareness.
Akeem,
yes, good.
I've not read the last half of the book yet, and so it may be in there, but you've got the free market economy, you've got planned economies like you saw in the Soviet Union and in originally communist China, and I'm looking at the way the free market economy is working right now, and to meet all these different goals and various things that we in the book about to make things more sustainable, is it going to simply have to happen through legislation, or is there going to be, do you have to start putting some planning into it, which I know creates a lot of inefficiencies? How do you create the most efficient economy and at the same time accomplish a lot of these goals that need to happen?
Very good question, Gary. First of all, when we talk about competitive market, right, free market, so we consider the capitalism or the United States economy is competitive market. It is not. It is not. We are not living in a competitive market. Look, why do we pay one of the most expensive, we are one of the most expensive country in terms of the cost of the health, because the cost of the health in the United States is about 17% of the GDP. This is the highest among all other countries. Because of the regulations, it is not competitive market. If you have a lot of regulations about how many colleges you can kind of really allow for the medical degrees, what are the kind of requirements to get a medical degree, and what is the cost of getting the medical degree? If you kind of really limit the supply, then you naturally increase the price. So who limits the supply of the doctors? I mean, the regulations, the country, right? So why then we have like everything expensive, way expensive? Because I compare United States with Turkey. Health is so kind of inexpensive compared to United States and much better quality in Turkey. And therefore many people travel to Turkey if they have a serious problems and not a good insurance. There is a called health tourism. A health tourism that the people go to Turkey, enjoy with kind of a week of living in Istanbul and just kind of really do their dental and then like many other things if they have a serious issues and they don't have a good coverage over here. Why one country accomplishes nice way the other? Because it's all about controlling and the supply part is very important. And now we call and promote is a free market. Free market means that you kind of really, there is no intervention. There's no intervention of the government. There's no regulations. Okay. So once you bring regulations and then you create the natural barrier, then you make it more difficult to create the entry and competition in the market. Then you create the monopoly. So therefore, one of the things I feel, Gary, is even though we call free market, we call competitive market, it is not. So why is not? Because in the United States, the legislation system, the way that the government works, there is huge power. Like look at the political system. Individuals have to raise the fund to raise, right? To be running for a, for a seat to run for the government, you have to raise funds. So wherever the money comes, the money speaks always, right? So you have the power of the lobby, you have the power of the donations. If there is a lobby groups, they control the fundraising of the politicians. Eventually, they are the one who votes, they are the one who regulates, they are the one who really shapes our policies. So I will say in the United States, everything basically starts from the government. I will say, local governments, federal governments, but they are not really serving to the interest of the public. I can easily tell. They are not in the absolutely for both Democrats and Republicans. I have many, I will say, local friends, representatives and senators. They are very nice people. But if they want to remain in the politics, they have to serve to the interest of the money, not interest of the public. Okay, so they have to raise money. They have to raise. That's overall. I see, that's the very corrupt system, to be honest. In the way that the elections and the governments is being shaped in the United States is to the interest of the wealthy people, not to the interest of the society. And if you are greedy, you want to produce always for yourself. That's one. And when you say 50% works for the 5%, that's correct. Everybody works for them because there's no way you can enter freely in the market, in the competition, because it is being controlled and it's being regulated heavily by the government. And therefore, we cannot talk about the free market at all in anywhere in the world. That's not possible. Where we start, I think, politics is the number one, Gary. Okay, politics, because that's the one that drives the policy making process, and they are the one that really shapes the society and everything. That's what I will say, Gary. If you want to make a change, want to make really something in economics, but how can you do it? You need to have some selfless, individuals to be kind of really motivated by the interest of the society. But I see when you are in the, when you are in the politics, I see the people, they are with a very pure intention. They enters. A year later, you see they are also kind of being shaped, be influenced with the same ideas. They started to think like the other people. They started to act like the other, politicians. And it is difficult to really do any meaningful change, to be honest. I don't have much hope, Gary, Unfortunately, I don't have much hope.
And it's also sad to think that it's got to have to happen through politics alone. I think we can make a difference as individuals, but I agree policy is going to have to change for some of these things to occur. And I think that doesn't happen until we have a disaster.
That's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. When we have like a financial disaster, it's going to happen eventually, because this is not a sustainable system. Okay, we will have a financial disaster. Absolutely, I have no doubt. We will have a financial disaster. But when, I do not know. When we have it, then there will be a wake-up call. So the society at that point will ask for the change, and hopefully the change will be the right way at that point. Yes, Anne, I think we are 8:16. I want to wrap it up. Let's get the final comments. Yes, Anne.
You are in favor of pure free market?
Not necessarily.
Is that what you were saying? I mean, a pure free market would allow all these banks to collapse. A pure free market would have created economic chaos in 2008. That's what a pure free market would have done. And maybe we could have picked up the pieces then. But see here, the thing about a free market is you're never going to get people into the donut unless the government puts out the right regulations. You're going to have rent control. You're going to have increase of common space. You're going to have public transportation, public health, all the things that you're extolling about Turkey. And I'm very glad to hear that Turkey is like that. I didn't know that, but I'm very glad to hear it. But those things do not come about by free market. The things that benefit most people do not come about by free market.
And I absolutely aware of that one. I agree with you. What I try to explain when we teach in economics that United States is a competitive market. It is not. That's what I'm trying to explain.
No, it isn't. No, because the rich always have the advantage.
But the question is, in economics, there are two ways to create efficiency: either competitive markets or absolute benevolent dictatorship. Okay, you know.
But wait, why do we need efficiency? If all efficiency does is create the capacity to grow, that is what efficiency does.
Okay, so like that's a good way to, first of all, when we talk about efficiency, it is about the output, right? I agree with you. When like
Jevons paradox.
Okay, so like
you know Jevons paradox, right?
Yeah. So like one thing here is that like all the terms are linked to each other, right? When we talk, like I'm not promoting free market, absolutely. I do not promote like a communist way the market as well. So I more promote responsible.
I'm not a communist, by the way.
No, I'm not that one. To me, in fact, the responsible market is the best market, that you have the combination of the right regulations, the right policy making. Otherwise, you will create chaotic. It's going to be anarchy. So you cannot have a free market, you know, because there will be anarchy, right? So that then, to me, absolutely, without the government regulations, we cannot create a just society. We cannot create a donut. You have to have a government, right? So
yes.
that is a must. But what in theory we are teaching part of the United States model, that's what I'm telling. In theory, we tell, okay, the capitalism is about the perfect competitive market. Perfect competitive market is minimizing the government intervention. But then when we do get the government out of the control, then you cannot create the donut, because then you cannot have those.
Exactly.
You know, that's impossible. But when you bring the government into the equation, then if the government and if whoever is on, you know, responsible for the policy making, if they are not in the interest of the entire society, if they serve into the interest of a very special group, then that's another problem. So because then you know, that's what I think we have here in the United States.
If we don't get rid of the idiots that we have, we'll never have the donut.
Like, and I think, like, we know that what we need to do, we need to have a responsible government, right? We need to have the responsible policymakers. We need to have a right, you know, market system to work in synchronization together. But the problem here, I feel in the United States, the politics, the politicians, unfortunately, they are not here to the service of the community. I don't feel that. So the political system in the United States, I will say, so corrupt, unfortunately. So
I would say it's the system more than it is the politicians themselves, because they get put into the system and it turns them into what we're seeing.
Gary, I'm talking about the system, not politicians. There are many good politicians out there, but they are individual.
It's a circular loop.
Yes,
Start
correct.
With good intentions, and they can't keep it up. But
here you go. Absolutely. I wouldn't get into the politics, you know, because I know that if I'm there, either I have to be like complying with the system, or I cannot fight against the current. You know, that's impossible. So you cannot go against the current. That is something. The system itself is so difficult to, you know, get out of it. So therefore, to me, the system created. The only thing, as you said, just wait for calamity. You know, so some disaster. You know, once we have the financial disaster or a kind of really social disaster, at that time, you can change the system. You cannot change the system in the normal time. Therefore,
it could be a financial disaster, but it could also be a environmental or a social disaster. There's a number of different things that can occur besides just being financial. But I would think financial is probably the one that would be the most likely to occur in the
That's correct, Gary. Yes, social disaster, like the problem of the loneliness. Let's say this is being raised a lot, especially during the COVID. Now to kind of pay attention more to the community, to the, you know, the families, the relationships. That's very important. So to be able to do it, you have to shift the paradigm. You know, you have to shift the paradigm because now you have a problem. Now you want to really shift the paradigm. How can we provide this one? You are right. There could be different disasters might really bring the attention to fix it. So we'll see how the things is gonna really unfold to make a more fair, sustainable system. But it is not sustainable. It is not fair. It is not equitable at this point at all. I think this is a wonderful topic, right? You can talk hours and hours. You know, there are a lot of things you can talk. There's a great book. Absolutely, I recommend this for everyone. But unfortunately, we have limited time. Like again, in economics, scarcity, right? The time is one of the things that I say everyone face the same. You know, Elon Musk has 24 hours as well as me, so we are equal at that point. So we all face the same scarcity of the time. So we have to maximize our objective, given that's, you know, limitations, right? But overall, I really appreciate for your time. It was a very enjoyable, nice conversation. You guys, absolutely outliers. You are the outliers in the community.
Thanks, Akeem.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kate and Gary and Ann. You know, really appreciate.
Debbie.
Yeah, Debbie. Yes, Debbie. I'm sorry. Yes, Debbie.
Okay, I wasn't
so nice to see you for a long time.
Good to see you again. Right.
Yeah,
I keep swiping in and out here.
Yeah, come to our in-person events. Now we have, you know, we have restarted our in-person activities as well through Atlantic Institute. You know, watch the emails as you see if there is any in-person activity. You are welcome to join us.
Akeem, I recently joined the Piedmont Economics Club, and they meet at the Poinsett Club once a month, 6 times a year. And they're looking for speakers. And I was thinking it would be wonderful to have somebody like yourself come speak on donut economics.
Absolutely. It will be my pleasure. Yes, Gary. You know, do you have my email?
Yeah, Debbie's got it. So,
okay.
And I know how to find the Atlantic Institute.
Okay,
so.
Perfect. Send me an email. Let me kind of see the date that you propose, and I'm sure that we can find a way to make it happen. I'll be glad to come and talk your group. Absolutely.
I have to find the person that does the meetings, but I'll see if I can get in touch with them, and then we'll see if I can get them in touch with you then.
No problem. It will be my pleasure. Absolutely. I hope that if we can create a lot more awareness, why not? More discussions, why not? Right? That's what we need to do. Education. And This is, to me, as a community service.
Good. Perfect. Yes. Thank you.
And by the way, if you have anything in Colombia, I know that you said you are not in Colombia anymore, but part of your group, if there is anything Atlantic Institute to partnership, please let us know. And you know, you can reach Christina. And then if there is any programs and activity you think that we can, you know, cooperate, collaborate, so we'll be glad to help Ann.
I'll give that some thought. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Thanks so much for your time and have a wonderful night, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Sure. Bye.